All right, viewers, we shift our focus to other stories now. External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar held a bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, which is currently being hosted there. And this was the first such interaction between the two leaders after the landmark agreement between India and China to pull back the forces from the remaining friction points along the LAC in eastern Ladakh. And the dialing down of the tensions on the LAC and the exchange of sweets between the Indian and Chinese troops on Diwali eventually paved the way for Prime Minister Modi to hold bilateral talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping since the border standoff. Take a listen into this report.
Carrying forward the process of rebuilding ties after the bitter border standoff, External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the ongoing G20 summit in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro. This was the first meeting of its kind by the two leaders since the landmark disengagement deal between India and China earlier this year. Acknowledging the pullback of troops from both sides from the remaining friction points along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, the two leaders discussed the progress of disengagement. According to MEA sources, the dialogue between Dr. Jaishankar and Wang Yi also focused on rebuilding bilateral ties after the tense eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation along the line of actual control. Sharing details of the meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Jaishankar said that the two leaders acknowledged the de-escalation at the border and discussed the next steps to rebuild bilateral ties. The two countries earlier had reached a landmark agreement to disengage from multiple friction points along the line of actual control, including the Demchok and Depsang plains in eastern Ladakh. The disengagement deal and the exchange of sweets between the Indian and Chinese troops on Diwali resulted after the first bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping since the standoff on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia. During the bilateral meeting, Prime Minister Modi had said that trust was the key to restoring peace along the line of actual control and repair fractured ties between the two nations. Since the pullback of troops from all the remaining friction points along the LAC on eastern Ladakh, the Indian and Chinese forces have resumed border patrolling in Demchok and Depsang plains and other areas after a gap of almost 4.5 years. The meeting between Minister Jaishankar and Wang Yi marks forward strides in the process of normalization of ties between India and China.
It's been a very short break, viewers, but don't go anywhere as